All right, good morning everyone. Welcome to our session, How to Reboot an Agile Team. So we believe we have a lot to share with you this morning. Let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Martin, I'm an Agile coach back in Montreal, Canada. I've been working with Agile team, and coaching, rebooting Agile team for a number of years now. And what I enjoy, what I love the most is actually working with the team members in the trenches. I try to make everybody's life more enjoyable and better a day at a time. And that's a great experience. In my personal life, I'm a triathlete. I just completed my first Ironman 2 weeks ago in Lake Placid. And at home, I'm also doing Scrum with my girls. And it's a fascinating experience to do this with my two girls. And we're moving Post-its, and it's a great experience. So now I'm going to pass the presenter to my colleague, Maurizio.
So good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, thanks for coming to our presentation. Appreciate it. I'm glad to see there's a full crowd. I'm sure we could have had a few more people in here. So for myself, I've been practicing Agile for over 10 years. I continue to refine my process because Agile, you never finish learning, as we all know. And really my passion is to deliver quality software and really to look at how Agile can help teams deliver quality software. That's a little bit of background where I come from. Today's presentation will actually mark the 4th time we give this presentation with Martin. And like good Agile practitioners, we've been refining our presentation every time. So hopefully you'll enjoy what we have for you today. So Martin and I have been working together for a number of years. The largest transformation that we did was an organization with over 15 different dev teams, geographically dispersed, and it took us over 3 years to do that transformation. So transformations do take time, as you all probably know. So in terms of the agenda for today, this is our agenda. We'll start talking by something called the Edge Change and Comfort Model. So we've actually developed a model about the reboot process. And we'll share that with you throughout the presentation. And at the end of the presentation, we'll actually give you a canvas you can take with you. Okay? We'll also then talk about 2 topics, organizational change and simplicity. 2 things that we think are important as Agile practitioners and managers that you need to keep in mind. Okay? And then we'll spend time doing 10 minutes of an exercise. There's a reboot canvas on your tables. It'll be a 10-minute exercise. We'll ask you to think about your reboot context. So clearly you're here with the idea that you have at least 1 reboot, maybe 2 to do in an organization. So we're going to have you time to think about your reboot context. And the rest of the agenda really displays how Martin and I work together to transform an organization. So we work at it from 2 angles, from the executive angle in which we establish our essential ingredients as a foundation, and then we work at it at the team level. All right? So that's our agenda. We'll get going. So this is the beginning of our model. So we've decided to use a pyramid to depict it, and it's a 5-sprint reboot model. Now the question we've gotten when we've done this presentation elsewhere is, can it be done in faster than 5 sprints? And the answer is yes. It really depends on the team that you're working with. The other thing you'll notice is sprint number 3 is right there on the top. It is the sprint which is going to be the most painful in the reboot process. And Martin will go through why that sprint is the most painful. But if you can get through that 3rd sprint, then we can guarantee that on the other side of that, you'll have an awesome delivery team. All right? So before we get into more of the model, let's talk about 2 topics that we think are essential as Agile people. The first topic is organizational change. Now we know that organizational change has a role in how the transformations are deployed in an organization, right? And organizations are under pressure in their industry. And they're under pressure, things are changing all the time. And whether an organization likes it or not, right, change is going to happen in the world. And when the changes in the organization are happening at a slower pace than what's happening in their industry, you have this gap that develops at the organizational level. And when an organization is not proactive in dealing with change and doesn't adapt, then they're in danger of not surviving as an organization. So one of the techniques that Martin and I use is this technique called creative destruction. And it comes from the world of economics. And the idea is, if I summarize it in one sentence, it's the art of renewing an organization from within. So what does that mean? It sounds very fancy. It means that an organization has to stay on top of things happening in the industry. And it has to realize that when it becomes stagnant, that it has to renew itself. Or, if you wish, think of innovate, become different, right? And if an organization is able to innovate, then it will survive. Now, if we look through the historic waves of innovation that have happened over time, we can see that the creative destruction cycle is actually getting shorter and shorter and shorter in the new technologies, right? And the innovation curve is actually getting higher and higher. So what does this all mean? It means that things are changing fast. Organizations are disappearing and coming on very quickly these days. So as an Agile practitioner, you got to keep this in mind as you're trying to push Agile into an organization. It's important you keep that in mind. Let me tell you a story of a customer. I was dealing with a customer in Miami, and this customer was dealing with change, similar like this. And they were trying to respond quicker to the market needs, and they were trying to find a way of having their software teams deliver software faster to both internal customers and external customers. And we were having a conversation about how Agile could help them do that. And in the conversation, this customer asked me a very simple question. The question he asked me was, can you help me spin up some Agile teams? How many people have heard that? Right? Just spin them up. They're just teams, right? They come and go, right? So as Agile coaches, when we hear this kind of a question, it's the first indication that we're dealing with an organization that's probably dealing with some market pressures. And so they're looking for a quick fix. And if you look a little deeper in the organization, you usually find an organization that's more stagnant on what's happening in terms of how the organization operates. And inevitably, if you look down at the team level, you'll find teams that are using processes that when you ask them the question, well, why do you do things that way? They will give you the answer, because we've always done it that way. So to answer the question of my customer, I said to my customer, well, it takes time to develop an organization with mature Agile teams. It's not something you do overnight. So what I suggested as a strategy is, what if we build one Agile team properly? We implement good Agile practices, we then show success with this Agile team, and then we take this team and we promote it across the organization to deploy Agile into other teams. And this is the strategy that Martin and I have used with the organization that I mentioned earlier. So keep in mind organizational change in terms of your context. Very important. Now, the other thing that we need to keep in mind as Agile practitioner is the principle of simplicity. And we find that sometimes organizations tend to launch these large change initiatives that are very complicated. But we feel that actually they should start with small, simple steps. And we feel that they can actually learn something from Leonardo da Vinci. And Leonardo said it best when he said, "La semplicità è la più grande sofisticatezza." Or in English, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And we actually think that Leonardo was onto something. Or perhaps he was inspired by his mom's cooking. And so people that know Italian cooking know that it starts with a simple recipe. And a true Italian recipe only has 5 or 6 ingredients. If anybody tells you that they have an Italian recipe with more than 5 or 6, trust me when I tell you it's not a true Italian recipe. Now, the fact that we have a recipe in no way guarantees that the execution of that recipe will be successful. So many of us have tried to make mom's recipe. And at the end, the taste is, well, just not exactly like we expected, right? Just doesn't happen. Something's missing. We don't execute the way mom did, right? And so when it comes to Italian cooking, you start off with a simple recipe, and you start off with I start off with a simple recipe, and we feel that this is the same thing that you need when you deploy Agile. But we feel that the secret in deploying Agile is not so much in the recipe, but in how you execute the recipe. And this is why when you hear people say, well, I have the secret of Agile, I have the secret recipe, I know how to do it. And then you look at the Agile landscape, and all you see is, lots of Agile failures out there. So for Martin and I, when we start a transformation or a reboot, we start with the principle of simplicity, we don't overcomplicate it, and we start with some essential ingredients. So these are the two things we should keep in mind as Agile practitioner. All right? So, time for you to think of your reboot context. All right? So you have a canvas at the table, and you guys can decide to do this however you want. You can fill it in individually, you want to work with someone next to you. The canvas looks like this. And what we're going to ask you to do is, at the top of the canvas, in a few words, just write out the context of the team you want to reboot. It's a team, and communication's not great, there's interdependencies, maybe the product vision isn't clear. A couple of sentences. In the objective, write down one objective. So your objective of the reboot that you want to do. The objective could be, I want to improve my team communication on a daily basis, or I have a team that has the dev QA wall that exists inside the Agile team, and I'd like to knock it down. That's the objective. And at the bottom, we have 5 impediments. And hopefully you don't have more than 5 impediments. But try to think of the impediments that are stopping your Agile team from being as successful as it could be. So examples. Your team has no autonomy. The next one is no real product owner. Another one is the sprint length is variable. The team doesn't take time to do test automation. Or remember that dev QA wall that exists. Everybody knows it's there, but nobody wants to do something about it. Okay? So these are the 5 examples of impediments. We have 7 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll ask for feedback for 3 minutes. All right? So 7 minutes, and we'll keep track here. All right, so let's finish up. All right, so how we're going to do this, clearly we won't have time to get to all of it, right? So we're going to ask for one person to share a context of their reboot team. Then we'll ask for one person to provide us an objective of a reboot. And then we'll go through and gather a few of the impediments that are in the way. Okay? So who wants to share their context of a reboot of a team? So go ahead, stand up and speak loudly so people can hear you.
Can everyone hear me? So my team, so I work for NASA, and we've got a team of 10 developers. We've been practicing, we started with XP, and we've moved to Agile. So are we on? Can everybody hear me? No.
You don't hear. I think it was better without the mic.
All right.
Go for it. Keep talking without the mic.
So half the team has really adopted Agile, and then we've got another 5 who are, I would call them cowboys and warriors, who like to basically do their own thing.
Right.
It's very hard to mesh the group, and so we're trying to basically, we're trying to maintain 800,000 lines of hard to maintain Fortran. It's very difficult to bring everyone into alignment regarding the, basically the focus of the project. So everybody's getting pulled in very different directions.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. And so you all probably have different, obviously we're not all at NASA, but different situations, but you have a team that is just not clicking, right? What about an objective, an example of an objective of a reboot? Who would want to share an objective? Anybody? Otherwise I start thinking. Go ahead.
Just want one objective?
Just one objective.
Okay. Give the team to move to testing in the same sprint.
Testing in the same sprint. That's a common thing that we see. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so let's go through the impediments now. So we'd like to gather, Martin's going to write down some impediments, and what we're hoping we're going to see as practitioners is we're going to start to see patterns. So anybody call out an impediment?
Product owner isn't engaged.
Product owner not engaged, okay. Next one.
You have a mobile distributed team that has bad skills of actually doing anything remote.
Okay. So distributed team skills. Okay. We'll give Martin a chance to write it down. Who wants to go next? Gentleman here and Martin.
Lack of time for training and development.
Okay. So lack of time for training and development. Okay. And yourself?
The stories are delivered late, so there's no time for testing.
So stories arriving late, no time for testing. Sounds familiar? Yourself?
Team members not cooperating.
Team members not collaborating. Diane has to write faster. All right. So team members not collaborating. Got that one? All right. At the back.
Insufficient user stories.
Very good. Insufficient user stories. All right. We'll take a few more.
Drop your minutes back into old habits.
The famous falling back into old habits. Yes. Yes, command and control. Gentlemen.
Regulatory process of change tracking, taking time.
Change track, keeping track of all the changes. Change management.
For regulatory reasons.
Okay. So change management taking time. Okay? Someone there? Go ahead.
Agile estimating for projects.
Agile estimating for projects. Okay? And gentlemen all the way at the back. And then the lady. Oh, okay. So go ahead. Go ahead.
I think the overall meeting of stories and always carrying on the next one.
Okay. The famous overcommitting on stories in a sprint, and when we don't finish, we just push it to the next sprint. Lady over here.
Incorrect staffing.
Incorrect staffing. All right. Okay, one more, and I think we're good. I think we see patterns evolving. So right here.
System dependencies.
Sorry?
Lots of systems.
Interdependencies. So you're stuck delivering, but you've got to wait for the other team that's only 3 sprints behind you or something like that. So interdependencies. Okay, great. That was awesome impediments that you guys came up with. So I think you can see that you're probably all facing similar things in different variety. And so what we'd like to share with you at this point is we think there's some essential ingredients that you need to reboot or even to do any agile transformation. And there's 6 essential ingredients for us, and the 6 essential ingredients act as the foundation to the model I showed you earlier. Okay? And if these 6 ingredients that we're going to talk about, they're not your standard ingredients that you're probably used to hearing, but if these 6 ingredients aren't there as the foundation of your reboot, it really is going to be a lot harder to reboot or get any traction with Agile. And our first ingredient starts with leadership. So we feel that you need to develop leadership at all levels of the organization. And for ourselves, it starts with executive coaching. So when we work with an organization, we'll start by having a session with the executives. Actually explain to the executives what is Agile. From the executive's point of view, well, I hear this thing Agile on the street is great, let's do it in the organization. But they have no concept of what they've just asked the teams to do. So actually having a session with the executives to explain to them how Agile is different, how it's going to change how teams are going to work from what they're doing today, so that the executives can then enable the change to happen. We then move down to the team coaching level, and at the team level, we all know at the heart of Agile is the self-organizing team, but it doesn't mean you're not going to need any management, right? It means you're going to need a new style of management, and that multiple people will probably help in the management process. Okay? So that brings us to our next ingredient, the management style. So in here we'll talk about Management 3.0 from Jürgen Appello, who's here tonight at 8 o'clock, by the way, in case you want to know. And Jürgen summarizes the new management style as it's the future of management, which is all about doing the right thing for the team, involving everyone in changing the system so that you can foster employee engagement. And if you look at some of the keywords that Jürgen is using in his definition, it's a lot of the same principles that you need to do an agile transformation or a reboot. All right? And it's with this new management style that you're going to need as a base that you'll be able to enable the change to happen from the executive level. If the executives don't enable with a new management style, it's hard for the teams then to take it seriously and say, I'm going to embed myself in Agile, and Agile is the way we're going to work, and so Agile won't take root as it should. So the enablement from the top is key to making it take root from the bottom and flourishing. Okay? So you have your leadership, you have your management style. The next is the vision, or the product vision. Now, why is the vision important? So the vision is important because that's how the product owner paints the picture of what we're trying to deliver and why it's important. And if you don't have a proper product vision, then how can the team engage? Now, it sounds cliche, you need a vision, right? But you'd be surprised how many teams we've seen who all they do is have a list of backlog, and they just keep working from the backlog. What are we delivering? Well, we're delivering the backlog. What product are you delivering? We don't know. So that's why the product vision is important. And it's more important in Agile because of at the speed you're moving. You're trying to deliver for most people every 2 weeks. So the deliverables are frequent. The changes in the business are probably happening quickly at this point, because that's why they want to go Agile, because they want to deliver quicker, right? So the team really needs a vision on what they need to achieve so they stay engaged and focused on delivering. Okay? So that's a vision. Now, once you got this vision, you've got to start communicating it. You want to communicate out the vision as a product owner so that you can develop the engagement at all levels of the organization. So you want that engagement from the management. You want those motivated team members. You want those people that take responsibility and really help you promote that culture of change. And so why do you need this engagement? Again, on Agile, we're moving quickly. And on the Agile bus, you really don't have time to be a tourist on the Agile bus. It's moving way too quick. So now that you've gotten the engagement, I get to the ingredient that's really dear to my heart, which is quality. And I'll talk about building in quality. So what's building in quality? It's really thinking about quality at every stage of the recipe or at every stage of the process. Without quality being there, without you having a proper quality strategy, there's no way you'll be able to get a good cadence for your team. And quality, we tend to forget. If you guys look at the Agile Scrum Guide, it's actually one of the core principles of Agile Scrum in the guide. And it even says, and in the guide, it says that the team needs to set a quality improvement goal in every sprint. It says it in the Scrum Guide, and you can go read it, right? So it's important that you have a quality strategy. Now, I've been talking about what is quality or building in quality. If this is your quality assurance process, where the development starts here, QA is always a sprint or two behind, and then inevitably QA is behind, never finishes. This is not building in quality. Building in quality is Dev and QA working together in the sprint, developing and testing, testing and developing to get that deliverable done. That's building in quality. So building in quality is about defect prevention, not detection. Right? So quality. Now that you got quality, we're ready for our last ingredient, the most important one, our chef or our Agile coach. So you need an awesome Agile coach to really make this reboot or transformation work. It's the Agile coach that will take the previous 5 ingredients that we talked about and will know how to mix them. We'll know how to, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and he'll make it work or she'll make it work. Okay? So, we're almost ready for the reboot. Right? We've engaged management, we've got that leadership going, great. We've communicated out that product vision, the team has a vision in mind. We've developed engagement at all levels of the organization. We have an awesome quality strategy because our QA people that used to be QA people are now engaged. And we have an amazing Agile coach ready to go. So, we've now filled in the foundation of the reboot. But we can't forget we're dealing with humans. And when we deal with humans, there's another dimension to worry about. And this dimension is so important that it can either act as your rocket booster for your Agile reboot, or it can derail your whole Agile implementation. If we take our 6 ingredients, we'll put them up on the iceberg. At the bottom is something looming, and it's the dimension called emotions. So emotions is the biggest and hardest thing to manage in organizational change. And as managers, if you're using that new management style, you've got to be managing the emotions that are happening at the team level. As an Agile coach, you're going to need to be aware of the emotions happening at the team level. Why? Because you're going to be pushing people out of their comfort zone. In Agile, you're going to be asking them to do different things. They're not going to be working as they used to. So you need to be aware of these emotions that are happening so that your team can succeed. And you need them to succeed so that the team feels they're delivering something. Now, the emotions you need to be aware of because people will start to perceive things a certain way. Oh, I'm on this team, now things are happening a certain way, so perception becomes reality. And all of a sudden, their emotions get in the way of them being effective on a team. So if you don't keep an eye on these emotions, they can really, really derail what you're doing. Now, there's two sides to this emotional coin, the positive emotions and the negative. And the positive emotions can be great. People will feel pride in what they're delivering, right? That whole positive aspect. They really, really like working on an Agile team. But on the other side of that emotional coin is the negative emotions. So you get somebody that perceives, oh, that person on the team is doing something to me. And all of a sudden they start to get demotivated. And now all of a sudden you have a demotivated member, and that one team member can bring down the whole Agile team. So being aware of emotions is key, because if you don't manage these emotions as managers and as coaches, guess what? The emotions will manage you. And keeping an eye on these emotions and developing what's called, let's say, an emotional intelligence. As a coach and as a manager, knowing the state of the emotion of each of your team members is key. So if you develop this emotional intelligence, that's when you can then push the team to say, increase leadership ability. Maybe you can reduce staff turnover. Maybe you're having problems with staff turnover. They don't like being on the team, right? Maybe you can increase that team performance. So it's all about developing this emotional intelligence and being aware of what's happening at your team level. That's the model, okay? So there's 5 sprints. We're sitting here at the beginning of the reboot. And the question you're probably asking yourself, well, how do we assess where we are today before we get to where we want to be at the end of sprint 5? And so it all starts by listening. And Martin will get through the listening and how we reboot.
So it's all about listening to our teams. You have to understand what's their emotional state. But more than that. So every reboot has a different context. Every team is different, and every team will have different needs. We worked on Maurizio presented you the different ingredients. That's key to understand before we start the reboot. The different impediments that you're facing, it's also important to identify them and put them in context. That's going to give you the ability to define objectives and develop a strategy around your reboot. Our preferred way for doing, for getting the insights from the team is actually to perform a survey. So the way we created our survey, we oriented this on 5 different dimensions. And 4 of those 5 dimensions are actually relating to the most common impediments that we are facing every day with Agile teams. So we have Agile health, product ownership, roles and skills, teams and processes, technology and delivery. So these are the main dimensions that we want to look at before we start our reboot. So here's an example of a potential reboot. So you see on that chart, we actually we have our dimensions all around. And we have a scale from 0 to 5. So we're going to try to see how mature is the dimension for that specific team. So the more on the outside, the more mature is the team. So you see on that graph here, we have more mature dimensions, but product ownership and roles and skills are less mature. So if we look at the first one, product ownership, so obviously we would have to focus a bit more on that type of reboot. We would have to focus more on that dimension. So we would have to look into the vision. Maurizio talked about the vision. Understand we have a vision to understand where we're going as a team, as a group. Do you have a backlog? Do you have user stories? Are your user stories actionable? So there's plenty of things that we can do around that dimension. The other dimension here is roles and skills. Well, we have Scrum Masters. Do we have product owner? Are we having the right people filling the role? Are we having proxy product owners? So do we know how to create ready user stories? So the roles and skills are actually very, very key in making this work. The other type of reboot, the two other dimensions, technology, delivery, and teams and processes. These would be the two weak dimensions here. Teams and processes. Is your team stable? I've seen so many times people being changed from one team to another depending on the urgency. Are the iterations fixed? It's funny, but when it gets hard, let's extend the sprint. So this happens all the time. So that's something that we would have to look into. The other dimension, technology and delivery. On this, like what kind of quality process do you have? Are you inspecting? Do you have a built-in process? Is your QA team 2 sprints behind? So if it's the case, then, and there's also the technology, are we doing continuous delivery? Like how frequently are we delivering? So these are all things that we have to investigate, get more info, get more insight from the team. In that context here, because the roles and the product would be more mature, it would be a good time to introduce a practice like TDD, because the team would be ready for that. All right. So why would we want to reboot an Agile team? Well, maybe because your team is what we call wagile, maybe fragile, or even tragile. That's the best one. Maybe you have a backlog containing thousands of tickets, of items, of tasks on boards that looks like, a waterfall process. So something very complicated. And that's often the case. Project managers are filling the role of Scrum Masters. Team size is more than 20 people. It's also very common. The teams are huge. The QA team is 2 sprints behind, and there's an us versus them mentality. Daily status are looking like status reports. This is so common. And sprint planning taking forever, no clear outcome, what we have to do and what we have to start on next. These are very, very common patterns that we see, Maurizio and I, all the time in Agile teams. So maybe you have one of those contexts here. So let's get into the reboot. So we did quite a few reboots, and there's a pattern actually coming out of all those reboots. Over time, we found that doing a reboot over 5 sprints is the ideal duration. Okay. So I'm going to go through the different 5 sprints with you. So in sprint 1, we call it run under the rain. Why run under the rain? Well, because the team feels like they're fighting the elements. It's really hard for them to make deliveries. It's a team that had success in the past. When they were created, they were able to make successful deliveries. Things were happening for them. But for some reason, the frustration kicked in, and the deliveries are not happening. So we need to identify why this situation is happening for that specific team. So the coach, in the first sprint, it's the time to listen to the team. It's not a time for making any changes. We need to get the insight from the team and share basically the pain with them in first sprint. Just being there and grasp the situation. So why it's always raining? This is where we actually in the first sprint do the assessment, the survey I was talking about. So let's get some insights, let's get some data. And that data is going to help us create a strategy around what is really needed for that team. So that survey and the insights that we're gathering in sprint 1 will help us create a roadmap for the change. And that roadmap, we will be able to communicate the roadmap to the team, but also to the management and the organization. And that will give the team a destination. They will understand the path that they are going to undertake. And just by communicating all this, people will develop trust. And trust is actually super important when we're going through change. So sprint number 2, we call it Thunderstruck. Thunderstruck because we will require a lot of courage. This is where we're starting to change stuff and to push people. So first we're going to break status quo. And to break status quo, right away at the beginning we want to start doing some training, some workshops with the team. We want to identify who are the creative people in the team. We want to generate passion. We want to generate motivation in the team. We want to bind people together. We want to create a team here, or recreate a team. So by doing those activities, we are investing into our future change agents, because we will need those change agents. The coach is there at the beginning to support, but in the long term, everybody in the team needs to take ownership of the new practices or the new way we're going to be doing stuff together. So we're going to train, and we're going to develop a common vocabulary in the team so we can speak on the same language. And then we start the creative destruction. So Maurizio mentioned it. Most of the time, we have to work on the backlog first. 90% of the time, it's a mess. So we're gonna have to work with the newly identified, the PO or the new PO or the PO in training, product owner, and management business to actually make a new backlog, create epics, create stories, create ready user stories. So when we start using them in ceremonies, we actually understand what we need to do, and we can effectively organize and plan those user stories. With the team, we're going to develop our definition of done. Here I was doing a reboot on 2 teams. So you see there's 2 boards and there's 2 definition of done. Understanding when we stop and what it means to be done. Having the same notion of what it means to be done for team members is very key. You probably all know about definition of done, but definition of done is really the trigger to does it work or does it not work. And then the last piece here in our creative destruction is we make it visible. So I bring my painter tape and I start creating physical boards on the wall. I know you're going to ask me what do we do with distributed teams. So I'll go to that question at the end. But by creating physical board, you get a sense of what's happening in the team. And we put the stuff on the board there, and it changes. It has an incredible impact on the dynamic, on the communication, on the responsibility. So we do our first sprint planning, and then we start putting our material on the wall. We gather in the morning to do our stand-ups. And when somebody touches a piece of paper, they're responsible for making something happen. The impact is incredible. But at the beginning, it's hard. It's hard. It needs courage to do something like this. So, sprint 2, we laid out the foundation to, we prepared our backlog, we worked, we trained the people, and we got our first sprint planning going, so we have the material, we're ready to code. Then we do what we call name and information. Why? Because the team is going to feel like they're crossing the desert. It's going to be painful. When we do changes, it hurts. Oh, I'm used to do this. Oh, this is not the way we're doing that here. Okay, but, understand that we are now doing things differently, and we will have to communicate. Repeat, 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 all the time. You have to be patient. And we have to manage those emotions. People are going to be frustrated, for sure. So if you don't know how to deal with somebody frustrated, your reboot is going to be harder. One way I found to, kind of manage those emotions was to have an M&M machine at my desk. So the devs are coming, they're taking their sugar dose, and they're opening up, oh, Martin, I have this problem, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so now let's talk about it. So just having something free, they're coming over, and they're opening up, and then we are able to solve things. Easy as that. It's not the only thing, but that's an easy one. We need to quit the Superman syndrome. We have strengths and weaknesses. We have to acknowledge them and see what we can do about them. So the faster we fail, the better. And from my experience, our experience, everything going through a reboot, to a drastic change in the way they do the stuff together, every reboot has a point where they fail. And the faster it happens, the better. Because now we understand that we don't like it, we don't like failure, but we can learn lessons from this. So the quicker they fail, the better. And I can assure you at the demo, at the first sprint, they will fail. So we have to work with the stakeholders, the management, make sure that they understand that the first demo is not a representation of the new team. That something better is coming. It's in the making. So to manage that frustration, what are we doing? Well, we're going to work with the product owner, guide them through the planning of the product backlog, understand epics, group, organize, introduce vision in stories. Mentor the Scrum Master. Scrum Master needs to be there to enable that communication, that transparency, that cohesion that we're going to find in the team. Support the team member, again, to collaborate, because most of the time they like working alone on their computers. So we need to bring them together. And visualize the work in progress. So I was talking about the physical board on the wall. This helps a lot. There's always a guy, in the first sprint coming and picking something at the bottom. Oh, yeah, I like this text. I'm going to work on this. So we need to start. We need to stop starting and start finishing. We need to work on the items that are the priority on the top. Liking it or not, we need, as a team, to complete user stories. And so we need to manage our flow, manage our progress, and make sure we complete stuff before starting something new. And having a physical board on the wall helps a lot. Right away, people are going to try to game the system and get back to their old habits right away in Sprint 3. It's challenging to change. So you're going to have people trying to over-engineer the process. We have to keep it simple. That's really important. There's going to be a very high temptation for command and control. It's not only management. The lead QA guy, the lead dev guy, whatever. There's a lot of people in the team that will try to get control the other person. So this new dynamic, we need to work on all this. You're going to start seeing user stories that looks like the old requirements. So for some reason, they're going to start squeezing in, and you have to be watchful at the beginning. Catch them, fix them right away. If you let one slide that says, as a product owner, I want this, it's on a bad track. So Sprint 2 was painful. It was about change. It was about going through emotion. It was about creating something new, a new dynamic. And I can tell you, once we're done with Sprint 3, the team is pretty tired of failing, of pain. And most of the time, almost all the time, they're ready to turn the page and get to something more positive. So this is where the team actually morphs into something new. They're crossing the edge. If you remember, we're going to give you a copy at the end, but if you remember the edge change that Maurizio was showing you, actually after Sprint 3, this is where we get on the other side. We get into a more positive. So the team starts liking delivering working software because we introduced the right practices, the right strategy. Building, we have a build-in quality mentality now in the team. And you see more and more people being responsible about what they do. There's going to be new practices. Here, a product owner I was training, we were working on a difficult project. The strategy we decided to use was story mapping. So we said, let's use the window. So we printed the epics, the stories. We put everything in the window. And then it became much clearer in terms of, oh, we have to do all this, holy crap. And then start changing some of the splits in the stories. And the whole team was able to see this and say, like, hey, I don't like this. This doesn't make sense. So everybody started to contribute. So we made the new practice visible to everyone. So a bunch of new practice, make them visible, and make them relevant to your team, accessible as well. And in that fourth sprint, we're going to start sharing our knowledge. It's not because you're a back-end developer that you should know nothing about front-end. We want to start sharing that knowledge. We are not expecting everybody to become a full-stack developer, in a reboot. But at least show some interest. Understand what the other team member is doing. If somebody goes on vacation, we want to be able to pick up the work and continue. The business doesn't stop. So, and we want to start enjoying that success. Then I get to sprint 5. So through sprint 4, we actually perform the changes. We change the team. Sprint 5 is more about making sure, being there, but for the coach, actually to take a step back and make sure that the team can repeat that success. Because sometimes they do it once. If you disappear, the coach disappears, then boom, goes back to the old habits again. So being there, a fifth sprint helps making sure that we can continue and just being there to remind and really empower the people in the team. These new change agents needs to be there and take leadership. So this is a team that used to have us and them mentality. QA and dev. They were fighting all the time. QA team was 2 weeks behind. They were not able to deliver. So what we did is we actually synced the two groups. We paired them. We paired the dev and the QA together. Said, now you're best friends. And we kind of took a step back. We reorganized our development, and at sprint 4 or 5 here, the team was in sync, and they were done ahead of time. They were able to go home faster, or in future sprints, we were even able to give them more work because they were more productive. They were working together. So we solved a big issue there. This other team, imagine you come back from vacation and you find your desk like this. So in that team, we had strong personalities. People were really, really talented. They were working on a mobile app. But the releases were just not happening. Everybody wanted everything to be perfect. Kept going and going and going. And the testing process, there was a big regression period. 2 weeks manual testing at the end. Whoa, delivering a mobile app every 6 months doesn't make sense. So by this team, actually, what they did is they created a new role in the team. This guy became the responsible for team happiness. And regularly, after I left them, they were having social activities together. The fact that these strong personalities that didn't go well along together started to have fun, doing other stuff than just work and finding that, hey, I can work with you, we can have fun. Oh, we can go bike outside. You like bicycle? Oh, that's cool, blah, blah, blah. So, they were having food and activities, and we did a retrospective outside, bunch of stuff that helped the group bind together. And we also worked on the engineering, a bunch of stuff. User stories well-defined, so they knew where to stop. Although they wanted to continue, we had clear limits of what we wanted to do. And the engineering practices, we implemented the automation in the process. So we killed the entire 2 weeks manual regression. We had bright people in that team. In very short time, they were able to figure out an automation framework, and everything was done automatically. That team was dealing with internal customers. A lot of frustration from the customer because they were not getting what they wanted. It took forever to get the enhancements or the fixes on internal systems. So what we did is we worked a lot on the priorities, on the backlog, solidify the role of the product owner, making decisions on what needs to be done first. And then with the team, we stabilized the sprints. 2-week sprints, small items into the sprints, and then let's deliver regularly. So that was new for them. And then the fact that we were able to deliver regularly, clients showed up at the demos, and they were amazed. And then they started giving feedback, and this team became superstars in the organization, like this. Why? Because transparency, organization, priorities. It became all clear to them. Here you have a group of product owners. So I rebooted a few teams, created a few other teams, and I implemented the Meta Scrum. So how do we create this collaboration between teams? Well, you can have a Scrum of Scrum and all these things, but that's something I found very, very efficient, the Meta Scrum. Get the product owners, the one the people who understand the work to be done, the work to be created. Get them together, have them to list their features and see if there's dependencies. And we started to see this thing is the same as this thing. Hey, let's share. Let's not do the same thing twice. Makes much more sense. So we were having this Meta Scrum every week where product owners were inputting what was happening with their products, with their features, with their user stories. So that brings me to the canvas, the Reboot canvas. So Maurizio is going to give you a copy of the canvas. You can see at the top the ingredients that we talked about. So when you want to do a reboot, you should look into the ingredients. In the middle part, evaluate the emotional state of your team. Where do we stand? And something funny here, the happier they are at the beginning, the harder the reboot will be. Right? Reboot dimensions, product ownership, roles and skills. You can see there the dimensions I was talking about from the survey. So you survey, you get data, but also you can take notes of the different input you're getting from the team. So all of this is going to give you a summary of information good enough to start building your roadmap. On the second page, well, actually on the other side, you'll see our model that Maurizio presented. And that brings me to the key takeaways. So on the key takeaways for this session, start with ingredients. Start with defining what are your impediments, your problems, basically, with your team. We suggested a few. Feel free to scrap this and define your own. Feel free to change them. Okay, it's not in stone. This is something over the experience that we found that was pretty much a good pattern, but define your own ingredients and understand the context. Remember that the emotions are going to be part of the process, doing your change. So as you're planning your change, make sure you have a strategy for addressing the emotions, but you know that you have a strategy to handle or develop an emotional intelligence around all that change. Change is hard, but work with people. Don't impose the change. If you're asking them, do this, people will not opt in. You have to involve them, work with them, ask their opinion, feel the pain with them. And this will bring you to a successful transition, and you will create change agents in the team. You'll see it's spectacular. And you're going to be able to do this with a modern style of management. Maurizio was talking about Management 3.0. It's all about caring and involving people in the way you're doing your business. So use a survey to gather data at the beginning. Build your roadmap. I was showing a roadmap in the earlier slides. That was inspired from Lean Change Management from David Little. I read the ebook and brought me a lot of insight in terms of Lean Change Management. Really, really interesting if you have a chance to look at this. And I tested most of the concepts he's presenting in the book, and it's actually working. So develop your strategy and help people to bring them where they want to be. And to conclude, let's not forget simplicity. Commit to deliver small pieces of your product. Even if you deliver one story in a sprint, complete the work. Deliver something that works. And stay with the basics. Remember, it's all about value. It's not the amount of user stories that you're delivering in a sprint. It's not about number of points. It's not about being flashy. It's about delivering value to your customer and delivering value to your organization. Value is key. That brings me to our fifth Agile value. Have fun at work beyond following a recipe. And that's it. Thank you.